Hey everybody, it's FMPONE here to look at Jura by Progressive VFX Nev and Nelson. So got through the names, should be easy from here on out. Um, so first and foremost, one of the things I really love about this map is the amount of hot air balloons that are flying around throughout the sky. It makes for a really cool visual. Uh, One of the things I do not love about this map is the general overall quality of environment art. You can see that there's some issues with shadows in the skybox, and there are issues with some art assets in the foreground. So I'm not going to linger on this point. I'm not going to beat this point to death, but I do want to state up front that this map probably has some of the more bland visuals in the contest. But that being said, this map also probably has some of the overall strongest gameplay in terms of routing, how the routes feel. Not even talking about, is the map fun to play? I'm talking about how does the map feel to move around in. This map is clearly one of the best in my opinion. And so just to give you a taste of kind of both worlds, you have this wonderful kind of open lane here. It feels super easy to explore. It feels like you could play this a million times, and it's always going to be, roughly what you want from a spawn point. But then you progress and you look at some of the graphics. It's just generally speaking dated. So like I said, I am not going to go through every portion of this map and just point out this is dated, this is dated. But you've got some kind of blurry rocks with not much of a transition into the world. So like I said, I'm just personally not interested in beating this point to death. But there are some positives that I do want to talk about, which is, generally speaking, the architecture of the map. One of the things that I find with this map is that I get the sense that the technical ability to realize um, the concepts that are being pursued is maybe not there, but a lot of the concepts are there. Um, so one idea I had for this particular sign, which is kind of, right out of spawn, it's giving you the indication of, B's over there, A's over here. But one of the things that a lot of the maps have done, Palacio, for example, is it has kind of a cool map of the overall map. And I find it's helpful and fun. So that could be one way to improve, something like this, an asset like this. And just to get kind of specific about, this is dated, or maybe the visuals look a little bit bland, one of the issues that this map has is very inconsistent texture resolution. So I can kind of tell from here that this sign is going to be blurry, right? Because it's just kind of looking blurry. I don't know whether that's going to come across in the video, but there's just a somewhat inconsistent level of texture resolution, it seems. But again, look at how nice these lanes feel to be in. Look at how pleasant the lighting is. Look at how much you really want to move throughout this environment. And there is a lot to be said for that, because a lot of maps fall short of that standard. Here you get this nice vista, which again, draws some of the transition issues into focus, but you also have this beautiful visual of the hot air balloons flying around, and it's very satisfying. So as you're playing the map and as you're moving through the map quickly, everything is kind of blurring together. You're getting a very favorable impression of this map. And I really like some of the subtle colors that are visible as well in the walls. In terms of, this map will have assets that look like they were constructed in Hammer rather than Blender, rather than, taken from Blender and then put into Substance Painter. So there's a whole workflow to kind of compete with modern CS2 maps on the art side. And, in the old days, in the simple days, it was more about gameplay and it was a little bit less about those things. And Jura is a map, frankly, that's kind of trying to bridge the gap a little bit on those two worlds, and it does so sometimes successfully. So, like, I think this area really looks great, and a lot of the areas where the sun is striking the white kind of limestone really brings out some fantastic light and shadows, and then the occasional accent of these red bricks. Occasionally, and I'll try to point out in every area where I feel like it's working really well, occasionally it looks fantastic. And then there are other times where it does not. So there is definitely potential with all of the architecture in the map, definitely potential to really have some awesome stuff down the line with further updates. So I really like this courtyard. I really like this technique. This is kind of a clever idea. So um, I've run into this issue before where I want to do this kind of spindly, you know, truss of, but then one of the issues you run into is that people try to go into the truss, so it kind of leads you to not go in this direction. I don't think I've ever seen this kind of mesh tarp idea, this concept before, with the text overlaid on the top. I think this is a genuinely clever idea, and I may steal it one day. I think it's really smart. What a smart technique. I really love the way that looks as well. You know, credit where credit's due on that one. Very cool concept there. You come down, and I actually like this kind of busy, contrasty metal. But what I don't like is the fact that it's applied to every single stair, every single step on the staircase, because I think it looks quite busy on these diagonals. But what I would probably do, I guess, in this situation, if I was to try to think about how I can improve this, is keep it here on this top step, where it's kind of drawing your eyes towards the staircase, and then I would create a more dull, um, maybe worn out, kind of less contrasty version, and I would use it on these diagonals to maintain the visual interest, to maintain the theme. So, a lot of the potential fixes for this map on the visual side are actually not that deep. They're not that intellectual, but they are necessary to some extent, I would think. And then, this is another example of how we've got a concept, we've got an idea, but the technical kind of realization of that idea is not quite great. So you've got this kind of blobby looking rock. And the funny thing about this rock actually is that in some of the areas where we're getting a similar dynamic of the strong light hitting the white with the normal maps, it actually ends up looking quite good. So sometimes it's about choosing where to use a technique rather than just completely abandoning it. But I would not use it right here because I don't think the result is all that great. I really like this little cubby, and this is another example of how on Jura a lot of the angles actually feel quite natural, I think. And it's one of the reasons that, from my observations of people's feedback on the Mapcore maps, Jura is consistently ranked as one of the more fun maps to play because I do think they've focused in on creating very natural angles, and I think that's a big strength when you can do that. Um, so I'm not casting any shadows on this. If you had placed a dynamic casting spotlight right there, there would be some cool player cast shadows on there. It's just an opportunity, and it's an example of how there are some missed opportunities of little things that could take Jura and actually elevate it where it's not feeling quite so bland anymore. And then I want to just walk through, again, the asset quality here. You've got kind of a almost CS 1.6 looking type of crack there. You've got some text that's quite blurry. And then you have the overall concept of the fossil, which I actually really like the execution of the fossil. I think that looks pretty cool, especially this subtle grain on it, which I actually really dig a lot. But yeah, just to talk about the gap between the modern workflow and what Jura kind of offers in some places like this, which is a crucial spot in a bomb site. This text, this crack, the overall shape, and the fossil are raw ingredients that are excellent. Those are excellent, perfect raw ingredients. So then it falls more into the execution of the idea, right? The execution of the concept is more what is lacking. So, you know, what if these cracks, for example, were modeled into the model? What if, you went into Blender, you modeled all this out, you applied like an 80-degree smoothing angle, and then did a supporting angle here along the edge, and then another one here, and then this corner would be smoothed out. So and then you did maybe a higher resolution on the text. So just those things are kind of what separates the really high asset quality that some of the maps have from where Jura is at. But the great news is that anyone can learn. Anyone can improve on the technical aspects. And there are multiple examples throughout Jura where I'm going to point out a great idea, a perfect artistic choice that is just lacking the technical knowledge of quite how to realize it. And again, the great news is it's hard to know what the perfect choice is. Very few people are going to know what the perfect choice is. But anyone can learn. So it's a nice problem to have, I would say, in the grand scheme of things. So I really like this room where you're looking up. Again, all of the architecture on Jura is very cool. I like this detail of how the cavern is kind of collapsing there. This light does not appear to be casting any dynamic shadow. So again, whereas Jura is kind of bland right now, a few simple steps, leveraging source 2, and all of a sudden you could have a really cool corridor right here. So just something to keep in mind. So as we're moving through, again, really liking all of the architecture. The stained glass, I think, is casting some rather blurry light, but I really like the concept, and I really like this watercolor that's helping to reinforce the theme of the level. Oops, I appear to have fallen through the level. Again, this one, I really feel like I'm in Poland. I'm really at this, kind of dig site or whatever it is. I feel like I'm there, so that's the good news. Really cool geometry here. Look at what a great... Actually, I'm going to turn off my view model so we can really appreciate that. So, wow, and it even got the map name kind of branding incorporated into this great screenshot. So that's a big win. I think the A bomb site is probably my favorite area of Jura visually. I mean, take a look at that. Again, there are aspects of Source 2 that are really shining on this map, and they give me a lot of hope for the future in terms of future updates to address some of the visual things, where I actually think this map could be stunningly gorgeous. It's just not quite there yet. Really like that. So this kind of damaged railing is a cool idea, but one thing I like to do when I have some edge damage like this is to put some debris and rubble on the floor so that it kind of carries that idea forward a little bit. I really like this Polish building, this kind of paint job. I think that looks awesome. It's stark and definitely reminds me of Poland. And I really like this cabin a lot. I like the way that looks. So there's a few techniques and ideas I would have about how to elevate this kind of stone on the bottom. Just make sure my view model is back on. So you have this kind of tile pattern on the ground. You could rip that up a little bit as you get near to the stone, have some foliage popping through, have some overlays and blending to just kind of seal the deal. And I think it would be worthwhile because this is just such a cool looking cabin. I do feel like perhaps these awnings would fall over in real life because they're just quite large, and I don't know, they feel like they've been scaled up a little bit too much perhaps. I like the roughness on these doors. It comes across really well, like right here. This is beautiful. And I kind of wish you got this effect a little bit more on the other door as well. So maybe I would make sure that more roughness information was coming through on both of the doors. This looks really cool, this wood. I mean, the resolution on the wood is not quite as high as I would like, but I really like the shapes and colors that are going on there. And what a cool roof, my goodness. How is it possible for that roof to be that cool looking? Okay, this is now my favorite roof in the entire contest. And the hot air balloons going on in the background. Super awesome. So that looks pretty damn sick. But this does not. So there's just kind of an inconsistency as well with Jura at times. And this is another example of where I want to talk about, uh, and you'll see it here as well. I love the textures that have been picked out for Jura. But there's a problem, and that problem is very simple. The modern workflow is you take this texture, you would model out every single detail, you would do a high poly, you would bake that in Substance Painter, and basically recreate the look of this texture on a model. That would be the modern workflow. And you do the same thing with this door. So there's a technical gap between Jura and some of the other maps in the competition, and where CS2 is really at. But this is such a perfect choice of a door. I mean, I can't even imagine a better choice of a door from a texture standpoint. It's so fitting, it's so perfect. So I have a lot of confidence and a lot of faith moving forward. Once some of the technical abilities are there, that our minds are going to be blown by the quality of what we see. Check out this room, for example. How friggin' cool is that? I have no idea what the hell I'm looking at. Zero clue, but I love it. And it feels like this is absolutely based on a real photo, so I'm not even going to dare criticize it. And look how cool that looks with the sign and the lights. I wonder if I'm casting shadow on these now. Look how awesome that looks. This is a nice looking map, but sometimes you just kind of have to squint because, there are other things that are really not awesome like that. But, I love this little birdhouse. I like that view of the suburbs. That's so cool. Let's check out this. Oh, this is kind of what I was talking about before. But, that's insanely confusing, I would say. Like, compared, for example, to Palacio's map. I find this to be really confusing. Okay, I'm here. That's tiny. That was hard to see. And then there's A, and then you go down the underpass to get to B. Whew. I'm glad my life doesn't depend on my ability to interpret this map because I would be dead. That looks really cool. Yeah. Oh, I love the architecture on this. Oh my goodness. See, the ugliness of this kind of execution really prevented me from seeing the beauty of this building. I think what's going on with the architecture is that it's based on photos, based on photographic reference, and little toilet. Yeah, all the architecture that is, I'm guessing, based on photographic reference just looks phenomenal. Yeah, I dig this gigantic barrel with the tree coming out of it. If this is real, I need to see the photo this is based on. That's hysterical. Yeah, you can just see. Okay, I want to illustrate something about Jura as well, which is that I currently don't have my radar up. Let's see, how do we get to mid? Well, you go straight in a straight line, and then you're at mid. Oh, okay, so I didn't really have to use my brain. Okay, how do I get to A? Well, you go right, and now I'm in A. Oh, how do we get to B? Well, you go left. And now I'm in B. And if I had chosen, for example, to go this way, well, now I'm in B. Jura is a map that you don't necessarily have to turn your brain on to navigate the map. And I think people really appreciate that. Look how cool that looks. Wow. See, when I chose the theme of big adventures, I could scarcely have envisioned something this fitting. I mean, that really fits well. So yeah, I think Jura at times can look a little bit bland. Obviously, not always technically great, but the overall impression I get when I look at clips, for example, I've seen a lot of clips on Discord of people playing this angle, getting a 4K or something. The overall clear impression I get about Jura from the player base is that they like it. They like the map. They think it has potential. They think it's fun to play. So, while it's easy to get hung up on the technical details of, a building like this, it's just kind of looking a little bit dated and weird. There's also other stuff like this that looks fucking awesome. So, a little bit of an inconsistent story with Jura, but clearly a map that people really like a lot, and I think pretty awesome map overall.